Okay, this is for my patrons only. I'm going to show you a bit of background stuff to what I do whenever I set up my recordings. So you'll probably imagine that I have two screens and I've just dragged a window from my right hand screen into my left hand screen. So you only see usually about half the screen. And usually it's filled up with the virtual PC. So here it is. And I've kind of maximized that. Let me just minimize this again or kind of make it a little bit smaller. And you can see here that actually this is a virtual machine sitting within my normal machine. So I can move that around. If I maximize it and maximize the screen, so it now looks typically like a PC. But what I'm going to do for this recording is show you not the virtual machine, but the right hand page. What am I doing in the background when I'm calling these guys? So just to let you know about the VM first. It's a standard one. I've got a pop-up which I saw earlier today. I'm going to give this number a ring in a second and show you what goes on when I call. The time zone on this is set to Indian Standard Time, simply because I quite often ask them what the time is. If they claim to be in the UK or the US, they'll not get any clues from what's in the right hand side here. So that's what I'm going to call that number in a second. This virtual machine as well, I've got the sound turned off, has got a couple of interesting things on the desktop. Account information is a remote access client. If they download this and run it, it's an executable. I will have remote access to their PC. I also set up an email address and I usually kind of forward some sort of ID, but it's a real account, and if they decide to email me, I'll be able to see what it is they mail me. I've got the name Terry Makachut, which if you know any Hindi is rather rude, and that's what my name will be for this call. So I kill that one off, and to say if they want to mail me, I can see what they're going to do. And that's really it. This is a kind of a clean machine as usual. It's got full antivirus, it's got Malwarebytes anti-malware running, it's got the normal Microsoft Security Essentials as well, which is more than good enough to kind of keep this running and in action. And as I say, all bar this thing, it's a pretty normal machine. However, what I want to do is show you what goes on in the right hand screen. So what am I doing as I'm letting this scammer connect? So I'm going to switch screens now. So let me just kind of make this a little bit smaller and minimize it. As I say, I'm going to show you what's on my right hand screen. For that, because it's OBS, I have to stop this one and show you the right hand one. Okay, so what's going on the right hand screen? This is my real PC. As I say, it's got the real time set on it. And as I say, I've got a few things already running. So I'm about to ring this number. I've phoned it before and I've got a little bit of background information. So what is the URL, what was their previous URL, what the phone number is, what the error message is, and so on, and an identity. So sometimes these guys will be sneaky enough to say, well, what age are you? Well, when were you born? So I'll have a good story to tell. I've got a phone number set up, which is a contactable number. I'll come on to why I want scammers to actually ring me. I've got a real address, which matches the post or the area code here. It's a Glasgow number. And I've got a credit card already and going if I want to type this in. Because I've contacted these guys before, I know what one of their agent names was. I can see when they call me back what their presentation number is, their CLI is. And sometimes if I have it, I will know what their IP address is, possibly where they are, and there's a possibility this may be a VPN. I'll have to check that. That's what I want to find out from this call. And the organisation who are behind that the last time are called 24clocksupport.com or .co.uk. And they've got a number of Facebook pages and a few other contact details. But as I call them, I'll let you see what else I do. The other important thing is what I'm going to use to call them. So that is this client here. Let me just start it up. And it's from a company called counterpath.com. And it's really a VoIP client. So hopefully this will start in a second. See, it's called Bria 5. It's a kind of paid for version. There's another equivalent of this, which is called X-Lite, and that's the one you'll probably be more familiar with. I'm using this because there's no adverts on this. There's just a kind of a counterpath thing at the bottom. And this setup is crucial. A lot of people ask me, how do I set up? What do I do to make phone calls? And this is the answer. I've got this as the software. But more importantly than that, there's quite a number of accounts. And I've got at least 9 lines configured, as you can see. One of them is disabled. I'll describe why that is in a moment. But whenever I receive calls and give a scammer my number, it'll be one of these 9 lines. And whenever I make outgoing calls, it's typically from there's one preferred account where I kind of top it up with money, and it means I can make international calls. I do prefer to ring 0800 numbers, which are free phone numbers in the UK, because I won't get charged for those. But if I do, some of the pop-ups don't have free phone numbers, and it means that I can make calls on that by topping up this information. So that's the accounts that I have, and say it's already enabled. The reason why one is disabled is because, as you can see, I've made a few phone calls here. These are inbound calls which have been answered in blue, and as you can see, there are hundreds and hundreds of calls which scammers sometimes get annoyed and perpetually get their call center to phone me. And that's why it's important that whenever I make a phone call, that it's a number that I can easily get rid of again. So because that number was being spammed, I can just go into my account settings and enable or disable it. I'll keep it disabled in case I get interrupted. But those accounts, as I say, are individual VoIP accounts in the UK. I tend to use SIPGate, and there's a good reason for using SIPGate. And the primary reason is I can change my caller ID. And I can change my caller ID by simply going onto the web. Under SIPGate, I click on caller ID settings, and I can change it to whatever I want. So I could update this to 1 or the scammer's number itself, doesn't really matter. When I set up my identity, my fake ID, I set this up in advance to say this is one of my numbers, and I'll save that. And it means that if the scammer asks me to code a number, or indeed looks at my presented number, I can give them something which is consistent. The other things which I've got set up here are Whois, because as I connect to some of these scammers, I want to look up who's registered their domain, so I always have this handy. Likewise with GeoIP, I can type in their IP address here and get a better view from quite a number of providers where exactly their IP is based. You see there's at least 6 here. I also have scammer.info running, again just to get background information on some of the scammers. And sometimes I'll have a look under who calls me, because you can search against a phone number and see what activity is both going on live, and if these guys are coding a number, I'll see what the feedback from other people is. And I always keep Google open as well, just for doing general searches. So that's my setup. The computer itself, I'll just go into that and show you it. I have quite a number of things sitting on the disk drives. I've got my main drive, C drive. Let me just go into under my PC and let you see that. So I've got a number of drives, one for the system disk, one for my documents, one which is just about putting these recordings online. These two, this one and the VMs are both SSDs, as is my system drive. So there's 3 SSDs here, and I have a disk for some software. So the recordings go onto my R drive, the VM runs in the V drive, and that's the kind of best setup. As I say, it's a system drive here. So the PC itself, it's not, I wouldn't say it's a brilliant spec of a computer. I'll show you what that looks like. Let me go into Control Panel. Just look at System and System. So you can see it's running Windows 10. It's got an AMD Phenom X4 processor, 3 GHz. It's got about 16 gigs of memory. The VM will have about half of that. And that's it. That's really my setup. So that's the hardware and software covered. The only other thing that I haven't covered here is Wireshark. I set that to monitor the virtual LAN card from the PC, the VMware. Usually it's called VMnet 8, and that's what I run as well whenever the scammer connects. So hopefully that's given you a bit of an overview about what my setup is, and hope you can enjoy my videos in future, knowing a little bit more about the background.